Sweat dripped from Owen's forehead as he stared at the foreclosure notice, his life's work slipping away. Then came the roar of a dying engine in the rain. Fixing that stranded Hell's Angels motorcycle was an act of pity. He never expected 1,000 outlaws to return the favor. Rain lashed against the corrugated tin roof of Miller's Wrench and Ride, sounding like a handful of gravel thrown against a snare drum. It was past midnight on a miserable Tuesday in San Bernardino County, and 52-year-old Owen Miller was still awake, covered in grease, and drowning in despair. Sitting on an overturned milk crate, Owen stared at a piece of heavy cream cardstock resting on his workbench. It was an official notice from First National Trust. 90 days past due. Foreclosure proceedings would begin on Thursday. 48 hours. That was all the time he had left before the bank seized the shop his grandfather had built from the ground up in 1954. Owen wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag, the bitter taste of failure thick in his throat. Since his wife Emily had passed away 3 years ago after a brutally expensive battle with pancreatic cancer, the medical bills had consumed every dime the shop produced. To make matters worse, a massive corporate auto chain had opened just 3 miles down the highway, siphoning off his regular customers with cut-rate oil changes and shiny waiting rooms. He reached for the switch to kill the overhead fluorescent lights when a violent sputtering sound shattered the quiet of the empty street. Outside, amidst the torrential downpour, a massive motorcycle backfired like a shotgun blast. The engine choked, gasped, and died completely. Owen walked to the rain-streaked window and peered out. Under the flickering orange glow of a street lamp, a lone rider was violently kicking the starter of a vintage 1980 Harley-Davidson shovelhead. The man was a mountain of a human being, broad-shouldered and heavily tattooed. As the rider stepped off the bike and ripped off his drenched bandana, Owen's stomach tightened. Even through the sheets of rain, the 3-piece patch on the back of the man's leather cut was unmistakable. The winged death head, the top and bottom rockers, Hell's Angels. Owen knew better than to get involved. The unwritten rule of the county was simple. You keep your head down when the club is around. But as Owen watched, the massive biker slumped against the handlebars, burying his face in his hands. It wasn't the posture of a dangerous outlaw. It was the posture of a man who was completely and utterly defeated. Against every instinct of self-preservation, Owen unlocked the heavy steel door and pushed it open. "Hey!" he shouted over the storm. "You're going to flood the engine doing that." The biker snapped his head up, his eyes narrowing. He looked at Owen, then at the lit garage bay. Without a word, he grabbed the handlebars and pushed the heavy machine through the puddles, rolling it directly into Owen's shop. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the biker looked even more imposing. He was easily 6'4", with a thick, graying beard and a jagged scar running down his left cheek. The name Iron Mike was stitched onto the front of his vest. "Alternators shot." Mike growled, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Battery's completely dead. I was trying to make it to St. Jude's in the city. I gotta be there." Owen grabbed a multimeter and touched the probes to the battery terminals. It was flat, completely fried. He traced the wiring harness down to the primary cover. "It's not just the battery," Owen said softly. "Your stator is cooked, smells like burnt toast. The whole charging system is done. You aren't riding this anywhere tonight." Mike slammed his massive fist onto the workbench, sending a wrench clattering to the concrete floor. "I have to ride it," he roared, veins bulging in his thick neck. "My kid, my little girl was in a pile-up on Interstate 15. They life-flighted her. My phone is dead. My crew is 80 miles behind me, and I left my wallet in my saddlebag that flew off somewhere near Barstow." The outlaw took a shaky breath, the anger draining from him, leaving only a terrified father. "I ain't got a dime on me, mechanic. I don't have plastic. I don't have anything, but if you don't fix this bike, I swear to God I'll push it the next 30 miles. Owen looked at the man. He remembered the night Emily took a turn for the worse. He remembered the desperate, suffocating panic of speeding toward the hospital, praying he wouldn't be too late. He wouldn't wish that feeling on his worst enemy, let alone a man standing in front of him begging for help. "Put your vest on the chair. There's a coffee pot in the corner," Owen said, turning toward his parts room. Mike blinked, caught off guard. "I told you I can't pay you." "I heard you," Owen replied, disappearing into the back. He walked down the dusty aisles until he found a cardboard box on the top shelf. Inside was a brand-new high-performance stator and rotor kit meant for a 1980 shovelhead. It was a rare, expensive part. Owen had ordered it weeks ago for a wealthy client who had eventually flaked. He was planning to return it tomorrow morning for a $450 refund money he desperately needed to buy groceries and keep his electricity on for a few more days. Owen stared at the box. $450. He closed his eyes, let out a long sigh, and pulled the box off the shelf. For the next 3 hours, the shop was filled with the rhythmic sounds of ratchets, the smell of fresh primary fluid, and the low hum of the rain outside. Owen worked meticulously. He drained the oil, pulled the primary cover, stripped out the charred copper remnants of the old stator, and installed the pristine new system. He threw in a spare battery he had, charging on the rack. By 3:30 a.m., Owen tightened the final bolt and wiped his hands. "Hit it," he said. Mike turned the key and pressed the starter. The shovelhead roared to life, instantly settling into that iconic, thunderous idle. The headlight blazed bright against the garage wall. Mike stepped off the bike and walked up to Owen. The massive biker reached out and gripped Owen's shoulder with a hand the size of a catcher's mitt. "You used a brand new kit. I saw the box. You need reliability right now, not a patch job," Owen said, exhausted. "What's your name?" Mike asked. "Owen Miller." Mike looked around the shop, his eyes lingering on the foreclosure notice sitting on the workbench. He didn't say a word about it. He just looked back at Owen, his expression unreadable. "I don't forget a debt, Owen Miller. You saved my life tonight." With that, Iron Mike threw his leg over the saddle, kicked it into gear, and blasted out into the rainy night, leaving Owen alone with a repaired bike, $0, and a bank ready to take his livelihood. Morning broke with a cruel, mocking brightness. The storm had passed, leaving the San Bernardino sky a piercing, cloudless blue. Owen sat in his small office, nursing a cup of black coffee that tasted like battery acid. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the hours. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek silver Mercedes-Benz pulled into the cracked asphalt driveway of Miller's Wrench and Ride. Owen felt his jaw clench. He knew exactly who it was. Victor Gable stepped out of the car, adjusting his expensive tailored suit. Victor was the owner of Gable Auto and Tire, the corporate monstrosity down the road that had slowly choked Owen's business to death. Victor was a vulture, a man who thrived on other people's misfortune. He had been trying to buy Owen's prime real estate for 2 years, knowing the land was worth triple what the dying shop was making. Victor strutted into the garage, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the concrete. "Morning, Owen, beautiful day, isn't it?" "We're closed, Victor," Owen said, not getting up from his desk. "Come on, Owen, don't be like that." Victor smirked, leaning against the doorframe of the office. "I spoke with Gregory Hayes down at First National this morning. Word is you missed the final deadline. The bank takes possession tomorrow." Owen's knuckles turned white around his coffee mug. "That's between me and the bank." "It doesn't have to be," Victor said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his inner pocket. "I brought a contract. I'll buy the deed from you right now. I'll pay off the remaining balance of your mortgage, and I'll give you $10,000 cash to walk away. It's a generous offer. Better than letting the bank take it and leaving you with nothing but a ruined credit score." Owen looked at the number on the paper. $10,000. It was an insulting fraction of what the property was worth. Victor was trying to steal his grandfather's legacy for pennies. "I heard you were doing charity work last night, too." Victor chuckled, shaking his head. "My night watchman said he saw a biker pull out of here at 3 a.m. You fixing bikes for free now?" "Owen, no wonder you're broke. You're a dinosaur. This town doesn't need a neighborhood mechanic who works on feelings. It needs efficiency." "Get out!" Owen growled, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Sign the paper, Owen. You have until noon, or I take my offer off the table and buy it from the bank at auction for even less." Victor tossed the contract onto the desk, turned on his heel, and walked out to his Mercedes. Owen watched the silver car speed away. He looked at the contract. He looked at the walls of the shop covered in old Polaroids of his grandfather, his father, and Emily. The weight of the world pressed down on his chest, crushing the air out of his lungs. He reached for a pen. He was beaten. Victor was right. He was a dinosaur. He uncapped the pen and hovered it over the signature line. Then he felt it. It started as a subtle vibration in the floorboards. The stale coffee in his mug began to ripple tiny concentric circles, forming on the black surface. Owen frowned and looked up. The vibration grew stronger, rattling the wrenches hanging on the pegboard. A low, guttural rumble echoed in the distance, like thunder rolling across the valley, but the sky was completely clear. The rumble deepened, swelling into a deafening mechanical roar. It was a sound Owen had heard 1,000 times, but never at this magnitude. The windows of the office began to violently shake in their frames. Owen dropped the pen and walked out of the office, stepping through the open garage bay doors into the sunlight. Down the 2-lane highway, traffic had completely stopped. Cars were pulling over onto the dirt shoulders, drivers stepping out of their vehicles with their phones raised, staring in disbelief. Coming over the crest of the hill blocking out the horizon was a tidal wave of chrome leather and roaring V-twin engines. It wasn't a dozen bikers. It wasn't a 50-man chapter. It was a massive, unending column of motorcycles, riding two abreast, stretching back as far as the eye could see. The sound was apocalyptic, a bone-rattling symphony of straight pipes and heavy machinery that vibrated in Owen's teeth. Leading the pack riding dead center was a 1980 shovelhead, Iron Mike Henderson. But Mike wasn't alone. Flanking him were men wearing the patches of chapter presidents from all over the West Coast. California, Nevada, Arizona, Oregon. The winged deathhead was everywhere, a sea of red and white patches moving in perfect, terrifying unison. Owen stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. Local police cruisers' lights flashing had attempted to set up a roadblock half a mile down, but Officer Brendan Higgins and his partner had simply backed their cars onto the grass and stood in stunned silence as the unending parade of outlaws blew right past them. There was absolutely nothing the police could do. The column reached Miller's Wrench and Ride. Iron Mike raised a single leather-gloved fist into the air. Instantly, 1,000 motorcycles began to downshift. The deafening roar transitioned into a synchronized guttural idle. They swarmed the property. Bikes pulled into the driveway onto the grass across the street, filling the parking lot of the neighboring diner, wrapping around the back of Owen's shop, until the building was completely swallowed by a perimeter of heavy machinery. The engines cut off in waves. The sudden silence that followed was heavier and more intimidating than the noise had been. 1,000 men in leather cuts stepped off their bikes. They stood shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable wall of muscle and menace around the small, crumbling mechanic shop. Iron Mike kicked his kickstand down and walked slowly up the driveway, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped 3 feet in front of Owen. The massive biker removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were bloodshot, but burning with an intense, fierce light. "I told you," Mike said, his deep voice carrying through the eerie silence of the crowd. "I don't forget a debt." Owen stood entirely frozen, his breath caught in the sudden, suffocating stillness that had descended over his property. The sheer scale of the gathering was completely paralyzing. Before him stood an ocean of leather denim and weathered faces, all silently watching his every move. The smell of hot exhaust pipes, burning oil and heated asphalt wafted heavily through the crisp morning air, creating an industrial perfume that completely blanketed the small, deteriorating mechanic shop. Iron Mike Henderson took another step forward. The massive biker reached into the inner pocket of his heavy leather vest. Owen instinctively braced himself, his mind flashing to 100 different terrifying scenarios. But Mike simply pulled out a crumpled oil-stained bandana and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "My daughter Lily," Mike began, his gravelly voice echoing loudly in the absolute quiet. "She made it through the surgery. The doctors said her spleen was ruptured and she was bleeding out internally. They told me that if I had been delayed by even 30 minutes, she would not have survived the night. I would have walked into that intensive care unit and found an empty bed." Mike paused, swallowing hard, as a heavy wave of raw emotion washed over his scarred features. He looked directly into Owen's eyes, the fierce intensity of the outlaw biker momentarily melting away to reveal a profoundly vulnerable father. "I made it to Street, Jude's hospital, with exactly 7 minutes to spare." Mike continued, his voice trembling slightly before he hardened his jaw and regained his composure. "I held my little girl's hand as they wheeled her into the operating room. I was there because a mechanic in San Bernardino decided to show a stranger some grace at 3 o'clock in the morning. I am here right now because you gave me back my world, Owen." Owen felt a sudden thick lump form in his throat. He glanced nervously at the surrounding army of men. "I'm glad she's okay, Mike. Truly I am. But you didn't have to bring an entire army here to say thank you." A low, rumbling chuckle rippled through the front ranks of the gathered motorcycle club. It was a terrifying, thunderous sound that resonated deep within Owen's chest. "We didn't come here just to say thank you," Mike stated flatly, his dark eyes shifting slightly to look past Owen, focusing entirely on the crumpled foreclosure notice still sitting on the workbench inside the open garage bay. "I saw your paperwork last night. I saw the numbers. 90 days past due. The bank is moving to repossess this land tomorrow morning." Owen felt a flush of deep embarrassment rush to his cheeks. "That is my personal business, Mike. It is a bad situation, but it is my problem to handle." "Not anymore," a voice boomed from the crowd. A tall, extremely imposing man with a thick, braided beard and an eye patch stepped forward to stand right beside Mike. The patch on his chest read, "President, Nevada Chapter. When you help one of our brothers in the dead of night, you help all of us. You bleed for us. We bleed for you. That is the code." Mike nodded in agreement, turning back to face Owen. "I made a few phone calls this morning. I reached out to the chapters in California, Nevada, Oregon, and Arizona. I told them about a stubborn, grease-covered mechanic who practically gave away a $450 stator kit to a stranded man who couldn't pay a single dime. And I told them that this same mechanic was about to lose his grandfather's shop to a bunch of corporate vultures." Mike suddenly reached into his deep saddlebag and pulled out a thick, tightly wrapped bundle of $100 bills. He tossed it casually onto the hood of a rusted pickup truck parked in the driveway. The heavy thud of the cash hitting the metal echoed loudly. "Here is the situation, Owen," Mike announced, raising his voice so the entire crowd could hear him clearly. "We have 1,200 perfectly operational motorcycles currently sitting on your property and blocking the surrounding highway. It just so happens that every single one of these motorcycles requires a comprehensive, multi-point safety inspection. Right now." Owen stared at the massive crowd, utterly bewildered by the statement. "An inspection, all of them, that would take me months to complete. The standard rate for a premium safety inspection in this county is exactly $150. Mike continued, completely ignoring Owen's frantic mathematical protests. "We are a very impatient organization, Owen. We cannot wait for you to do the actual physical work today. So we are going to pay you in advance for all 1,200 bikes." Owen's jaw dropped in absolute shock. His mind frantically scrambled to do the basic arithmetic. 1,200 motorcycles multiplied by $150 each. It was $180,000. "Mike, no," Owen stammered, holding up his hands defensively. "I cannot accept this. This is charity. I am a mechanic, not a charity case." "It is not charity," Mike roared, stepping aggressively into Owen's personal space, pointing a thick, scarred finger directly at the mechanic's chest. "It is a binding business transaction. You will inspect every single one of these bikes over the next 2 years as we pass through town. You will change our oil, you will replace our brake pads, and you will balance our tires. You are officially the exclusive primary mechanic for the entire West Coast Charter." This is a retainer. Before Owen could even attempt to formulate a proper response, the Nevada chapter president stepped up and tossed another thick stack of $100 bills onto the hood of the truck. Then came the president from Oregon, then Arizona. Within exactly 3 minutes, a mountain of beautifully stacked green currency sat directly under the morning sun. It was more cash than Owen had seen in his entire lifetime. It was enough to completely pay off his mortgage, eliminate his crippling medical debt, and fully renovate the aging, dilapidated shop. "Count it," Mike instructed quietly. "Then go call the bank." Before Owen could even take a single step toward the towering pile of money, the shrill, obnoxious wail of police sirens pierced through the heavy mechanical atmosphere. A sleek silver Mercedes-Benz violently swerved onto the grass shoulder across the street, followed closely by 2 local San Bernardino police cruisers and a massive, heavy-duty commercial tow truck. The doors of the Mercedes flew open, and Victor Gable stormed out, his face completely purple with blinding rage. Right behind Victor was Gregory Hayes, the excessively arrogant, sharply dressed regional manager of First National Trust. Gregory clutched a leather briefcase tightly against his chest, looking visibly terrified by the massive sea of heavily tattooed outlaws currently occupying the road. "What is the meaning of this?" Victor screamed, marching aggressively toward the perimeter of bikers. "This is private property. You degenerates are illegally trespassing. I want all of you arrested immediately." Officer Brendan Higgins stepped cautiously out of his patrol car, his hand hovering nervously over his duty belt. He looked at the endless crowd of bikers, then looked back at Victor, clearly realizing that the police were vastly outnumbered and entirely powerless. "Mr. Gable, I highly suggest you calm down," Officer Higgins warned softly. "I will not calm down," Victor shrieked, pointing violently at Owen. "That property belongs to the bank as of noon today, and I have an exclusive agreement to purchase it at 1 minute past noon. Clear these criminals out, or I am calling the state troopers." Iron Mike slowly turned around his heavy leather boots, dragging slightly on the gravel. He walked casually toward the edge of the property line, stopping mere inches from Victor Gable. The sheer size difference between the 2 men was comical. Victor instinctively shrank back, his bravado instantly evaporating under the biker's deadly, unblinking stare. You must be the vulture. Mike rumbled, his voice incredibly low and dangerous. The man who builds shiny corporate empires by crushing the little guys who actually bleed for their communities. I am a legitimate businessman, Victor stammered, suddenly struggling to find his voice. And Owen has legally defaulted on his financial obligations. The bank is simply claiming what is rightfully theirs. Is that right? Mike asked, turning his intense gaze toward Gregory Hayes, the trembling bank manager. Are you the man in charge of the debt? Gregory nervously pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his sweaty nose. Yep, yes. The foreclosure is fully finalized. The property must be completely vacated by tomorrow morning. Unless the outstanding balance of $142,000 is miraculously paid in full, the bank takes immediate possession. Mike smiled. It was a terrifying, chilling expression that did absolutely nothing to comfort the banker. Garrett, Mike called out without turning around. A tall, remarkably clean-cut biker, wearing a dark suit underneath his leather club vest, stepped forward from the massive crowd. Garrett was the club's primary legal counsel, a brilliant, disbarred corporate attorney who handled the organization's incredibly complex financial logistics. He carried a heavy leather duffel bag. Garrett walked directly up to Gregory Hayes, unzipped the bag, and aggressively dumped the contents right onto the dusty asphalt at the banker's shiny, expensive shoes. Bundles of cash spilled everywhere. $142,000, Garrett stated in a sharp, professional tone, holding up a legally binding receipt of payment document. Paid entirely in full in legally recognized United States currency, directly settling the specific mortgage account of Mr. Owen Miller. As the authorized representative of First National Trust, you are legally obligated to accept this cash payment, thereby immediately nullifying all current and pending foreclosure proceedings. Gregory Hayes stared at the enormous pile of cash, his eyes wide with absolute disbelief. He slowly knelt down, picking up a stack of bills and thoroughly inspecting the watermarks. This is completely highly irregular. We usually require a cashier's check or a direct wire transfer. Cash is legal tender for all debts, public and private, Garrett interrupted sharply, pointing directly at the printed words on the currency. Sign the receipt, Gregory, right now, or we will gladly take this issue to a federal judge, and I will personally tie up your precious bank in grueling, expensive litigation for the next decade. Gregory swallowed hard, his hands shaking violently, as he pulled an expensive silver pen from his jacket pocket and quickly signed the document. No, Victor screamed, completely losing his mind. You cannot do this. We had a verbal agreement, Gregory. You promised me that land. I already paid the architectural firm to draft the new expansion blueprints. The debt is completely satisfied, Victor, Gregory whispered, hastily shoving the massive piles of cash back into the leather duffel bag. The bank no longer holds any legal claim to this property. There is absolutely nothing I can do. The mechanic keeps the shop. Victor Gable's face contorted in pure agony. He looked at Owen, who was still standing by the garage, absolutely stunned by the miraculous turn of events. Victor spun around, furiously kicked the tire of his Mercedes, and sped away, leaving a long trail of burnt rubber on the highway. Iron Mike watched the vulture flee, a satisfied smirk crossing his scarred face. He turned around, walking slowly back to Owen. Looks like your schedule just completely cleared up, Mike said, gesturing broadly toward the endless sea of waiting motorcycles. Are you going to stand there looking confused all day, Owen? Or are you going to grab a wrench and start inspecting some bikes? Owen looked at the towering pile of retainer cash sitting safely on the hood of the old truck. He looked at the signed bank receipt safely in Garrett's hands. He looked up at the faded, weathered wooden sign above his garage door that proudly read, Miller's Wrench and Ride. His grandfather's incredible legacy was safe. The burden that had been ruthlessly crushing his spirit for 3 agonizing years was finally gone. Tears welled up in Owen's tired eyes, but he quickly wiped them away with his grease-stained sleeve. He finally allowed himself to smile, a genuine deep smile that he hadn't truly felt since Emily was alive. "Pull the shovelhead into bay number 1. Mike." Owen commanded his voice, suddenly thick with renewed confidence and overwhelming gratitude. "Let's check those brakes." The massive crowd of 1,000 outlaws erupted into a deafening, triumphant cheer, their powerful engines roaring back to life, filling the sunny California valley with the beautiful thunderous sound of ultimate victory. If Owen's incredible true story of kindness and karma moved, you please hit that like button and share this video with your friends to spread the message. We bring you powerful, dramatic, and truly inspiring real-life stories every single week, so make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What would you have done in Owen's shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.